turn my video on, and here I am. Good afternoon. We have a very small group today, and so it will make for much more of an intimate interaction. So welcome all. Welcome to the webinar, Engaging All Families, One Size Fits All. I am George Triest. I am the Director of the State Performance Plan Technical Assistance Project. We are at the Napa County Office of Education. I'm with my dear colleagues Linda Blong, Rebecca Anderson, Connie Silva-Broussard, Jen DeShazer, and Susan Stewart here. And we have a very engaging webinar coming up. I want to remind everybody that we are funded by the California Department of Education, Special Education Programs, to provide assistance to districts on issues around reducing disproportionality, that is the overrepresentation of ethnic and racial minorities in special education programs. We do this by offering communities of practice, webinars just like this. We provide ongoing assistance via technical assistance facilitators and individual assistance when districts call upon us to provide information. And then we have our website here. Talking about webinars, and more information will be sent to you as the time approaches. May 12th, we'll be doing a webinar on culturally relevant PBIS. Dr. Nancy Dome will be giving this webinar, and again, more information as the time gets shorter will be sent to everybody on this webinar. And on June 16th, we've got a very exciting webinar by Dr. Ann Gregory from Rutgers University there in New Jersey on implementing restorative practices. Both those webinars are from 12 to 1:30 West Coast time. And so I would like to introduce Cathie Johnson. Cathie has worked in the field of education for well over 35 years as an administrator and as a teacher in both general and special education. She has worked at the district level and school site level, both elementary and secondary. And Cathie's roles have included intervention data coordinator, least restrictive environment administrator, professional development director, special ed director, and administrator for closing the achievement gap. And most importantly to us, she is a very knowledgeable, personable, caring, technical assistance facilitator working with a number of districts throughout California currently. She is an employee of the LA Unified School District. So with that, Cathie, we've just got a few people signed in here. This webinar will be archived, and so people can view this not necessarily, well, not in real time, and they'll be able to glean the information that you present on a Saturday or Sunday or during their vacation or during summer. So with that, I want to turn it over to you, Cathie. I will make my, there you go, and press *6 and have at it. Ladies and gentlemen, Cathie Johnson.
Hi, welcome all to it. That's awesome. I think we might have lost a few people to spring break. It's kind of tempting to be out there in this beautiful weather. But I'm thrilled to be here today to talk about family engagement. It's a passion of mine, actually. I think it's kind of a missed opportunity for a lot of us to engage a lot of the parents who have disengaged from the school system, whether it be their own experiences that were negative or as a student or as a parent, and just to really talk together. And there's only a few of us, so we can really have some good conversation. I think that's awesome. And please feel free just to *6 and jump in and share, because we are such a small group. And our goals for today are to define family engagement versus family involvement. There's a real movement to say engagement rather than involvement, because involvement kind of means we're just having parents show up for the bake sale, and we want to move a little beyond that and really engage parents in everything we do, all of our instructional initiatives. I'm going to examine a couple of the federal and state frameworks that are out to help us frame our work around family engagement, connect the family engagement to our work around disproportionality, and reflect on our own cultural understandings and beliefs and how they impact our relationships and beliefs with our collaborative practices with parents.
Hey, Cathie, we lost you on camera, so could you do something about that if possible? There you go.
There I am.
Now.
So I know there's just a few of us, but if you have colleagues with you, if not, just think of one word and put it in chat that describes your family engagement, where you think your district is currently at with family engagement, if you had to sum it up in one word. Oh, George, yours is good. I like that response. San Francisco, I really love your word evolving. Would you share a little bit with us about how you're evolving with your family engagement?
And press *6 to so we can all hear you, San Francisco.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. We're sitting in a cubicle trying to be quiet so we don't disturb everybody around us. What we've done is we've reached out to a lot of different community organizations, not just special ed, community advisory committee, and they're beginning to see the light. In fact, our superintendent just the other day, last Saturday as a matter of fact, commented how finally the involvement of families is becoming a real driving force behind a lot of things happening here. So hopefully this will hang on through the summer, and come fall we can really ramp up and get families involved.
Oh, that's awesome. And then Mary, you say semi-active. Could you talk a little more about that?
And Mary, you're going to need to press *6 so everybody can hear you. Cathie, go ahead. Technical problems there.
Thanks for sharing the semi-active. I think we'll talk a little more about that later. So there's a common definition that's in the research right now about family engagement, and it says family engagement's any way that a child's adult caretaker, and that could be biological parents, foster parents, siblings, grandparents, it's how they effectively support learning and healthy development. And I underlined the any way because sometimes the way that that adult caretaker is supporting that student doesn't match with what our beliefs are and the ways we should support students. And that's kind of the miscommunication that sometimes disengages parents. So we really want to look at ways to bridge that communication gap. And the whole concept of involvement versus engagement. Involvement, if you look at the root of the word, it really means just to cover up or wrap around. And I think that's what we've done a lot of. We've done a lot of bake sales, a lot of volunteer work, but we really want to move to true engagement. And that word really means to make a pledge and to make an obligation. I kind of look at it like involvement. So you're dating and you're just going after the movies. But once there's an engagement, you've really made a commitment and you're really going to have a trusting relationship. So if we move towards engagement, I think we'll have much better relationships with our families. Why is family engagement so important? I think we all know this at this point in education, that it really continues to prove that that is one of the keys to student success throughout their entire school career. Family engagement must be part of who the district is and not just what it does. And again, the students and the families are the district. We wouldn't exist without them. So I think many times it becomes the school makes all of the activities and the parents need to kind of fit in. And the paradigm shift would be we fit our activities to meet where the families are at. So that's really a concept we're working towards. Parent engagement should be part of the SAFE plan. And those of you who have stakeholder groups, I know some of you are new in the process, but you have parents involved, and that's a critical piece. And they're having those conversations with you around disproportionality and how to engage more in the student's instruction. And again, it's part of the local control funding formula goals. They really put an emphasis on the partnerships between families and parents, so that really puts it in the forefront. So I'd like to take just a quick poll, and you just raise your hand under your name. How many of you are familiar with the Partners in Education, a dual capacity building framework for family school partnerships? It's a new framework that's just been released recently. Just raise your hand.
So too, if you want to raise your hand, so look on the left side of the screen under Cathie's picture, and you should see your own name and a little icon of your hand. And if you press that, that's how you can respond to this poll.
Thank you. Okay. So maybe it's a good thing we're going to review the new set frameworks that are out, because I'm hoping this will give you a little support for some of your work. I don't know how many of you have actually used any of these documents with your leadership teams, but they're pretty awesome, so we're going to go over those a little bit. The first being, I have to thank Linda Blong from SPP-TAP. She really brought this to my attention. I hadn't seen it myself. There is a webinar on WestEd's website, and it's the new guidance for partnering with diverse families, the National Framework for Dual Capacity Building. And the awesome thing about this framework is they're really taking on the issue of how are we going to involve all families. Engage, I use the word involved, but how are we really going to engage those parents that are on the perimeters and the parents of color that might not match what the school is used to, and how can we build those relationships? This is what the framework looks like. You can download it at this website. And the intention of this, it's not like the usual, here's what you need to do, you need to have this ELAC meeting, this SSC meeting. It's not giving a list of the things you need to do and how you're going to meet that. It's kind of like a compass and a guide and building blocks to help you engage stakeholders in a more meaningful way than we've done in the past. There are those mandated meetings, of course, and everything that we have to do, but this is really giving you some different information on how to engage all stakeholders in the process. It was built on the 5 essential supports that came out of the University of Chicago, and they did a study, extended study of effective schools, and they found that these 5 areas were present in every one of those schools that had positive outcomes to their instructional core. And you see, of course, number 3 is parent and community ties. And they also found that if you take out one of those pieces, the school wasn't as effective. So it's pretty powerful when we get the parents involved. You kind of look at this, it's like a recipe. If you're baking a cake, if you leave out the eggs, your cake isn't going to rise. If you leave out the parents, you're not going to see the positive outcomes that we'd like to see for our kids. It's lined up again in the 4 areas, and the first being the challenging issues we deal with, and that's considered the most ineffective practices, but that's where we're all starting usually, and it's working our ways down into what would be the more effective engagement. And I'll go over those a little more in depth with you. The challenge, they talk about things in this area about how to cultivate and sustain positive relationships with families, which is really not as, it's definitely not as easy as it sounds. I'm sure you all know that. And they did a poll of teachers and families, and they really feel they lack the knowledge and skill, and especially the cultural competency to engage in effective relationships. So those are some of the challenges. And the fact that this is called a dual framework, they look at the challenge for the schools and the district, and then the challenge for the family, and how we can bring that together. The second area are those opportunity conditions. What can we do? Initiatives have to be linked to learning. We have to really connect the parents with what's going on with their students. And the development versus the service orientation. Are we just doing the bake sale, or are we moving beyond that and developing the capacity of families as partners? And are we focusing efforts on building respectful and trusting relationships? And how do we do that? What kind of professional development do we plan for our districts? What are we doing? And this is a really key piece of the group learning. Are we having teachers and staff together with families in training? Are we having Common Core training together? Is it a kind of a standalone and the parents get this little piece and the staff gets this little piece? So this concept of group learning and really sharing it is pretty powerful. And collaboration, that's the same meaning. Are we really collaborating in a true way and bringing in our families as partners? The policy and program goals, this would be the third step, and this is based on 4 conditions. And they're saying the capabilities. Do we have the skills and knowledge, the cultural competency to do this work? Are we making connections and networks? Are we partnering parents together? That's a very powerful tool. If you bring some of your parent groups together and help them bond, it's pretty powerful. Are we recognizing the social capital that all of our families bring and that we bring? Are we having those conversations? Cognition, our beliefs, values, and worldview, and I think that's one of the critical pieces in our work with disproportionality. And I think we all come to that point after we review our data and review everything and we make these fabulous plans. We really have to sit back and think, do we believe in this work and can we do it? So that's a very significant piece. And confidence, do we really think we have the ability to work across these lines of cultural difference? How are we going to empower the parents to do that? And it's a difficult task. But this framework really offers some great strategies for working through some of those challenges. And then the fourth area, which would be considered the most effective school partnerships for supporting students, is the family and staff capacity. So have we built staff capacity to honor and recognize our families' funds of knowledge, what they bring to the table? Are we connecting family engagement to student learning and creating welcoming and inviting cultures? And then with the families, are we building their capacity to be supporters, encouragers, monitors, advocates, decision makers, and that's key, and collaborators? Because if they don't feel part of this process, we're not going to be able to pull them in a meaningful way. So this is basically how the framework's laid out. It's really a great tool. And I put vision here because I think this framework really has the vision of taking on that issue of beliefs and values and how we're working with diversity. It's one of the first documents I've actually seen that's moved towards that area, so I think it's pretty awesome. It also offers 3 case studies of effective parent engagement strategies connected to this framework, and they do it from the perspective of a school site, a district, and a county perspective. I do it with Santa Clara County. And it's a great webinar. You should log on. It's in their archives, and the information will be at the end of this. It's really a great tool to use with your leadership teams to view this and see how you can implement this framework into some of your work. So another quick poll. Raise your hands. This is the second framework that's currently out, and this is from the California Department of Education, and they worked on this in collaboration with West Ed. So how many of you have seen this framework? If you could raise your hand right under your name. Okay, I'm going to move forward with this then. So this is how it looks, and it was actually updated and revised and sent out to all school districts in November of this year. And this one has some specific steps that are mandated to be carried out. So it's a great tool to find. You can find it on this website. And they developed this model around the standards that Johns Hopkins University came up with for parent involvement, which would be on the first slide here. And they kind of evolved that into the federal definition of what is needed for family engagement at all levels. And you see they've expanded theirs. And number 6, of course, the equal opportunity for educational access, which is key to our work. So the components of this plan, it starts with district principles, and this is a 1-page overview of the essential actions for family and community involvement at the district level. Then you have required district activities and implementation rubrics. And these rubrics describe specific actions for each, and there's 18 other principles embedded within each of the 5 principles. So there's a lot of resource here. They have tools for communicating with families, 1-page descriptions of district activities, and it's in a simplified format. And I do believe this is in Spanish also on their website, this entire framework. So just a quick look at those components. The district principles, there are 5. There's capacity building, leadership, resources, fiscal and other, progress monitoring, and then the big piece, access and equity, which is why I really feel both of these frameworks are very useful in the work that we're doing around culturally relevant practice and the issues of equity and disproportionality. This is what the rubric looks like for implementation, and this is just under that one area 5, access and equity. And you see the first 2 columns, the required activities. And then, of course, we want to be a little more progressive as we move along, and then you move to the end to innovative implementation. And there are pages and pages of these to really help. For example, some of the required would be that you're going to provide opportunities for participation of parents who are economically disadvantaged, who have limited English proficiency, disabilities, are migratory, or have children with disabilities. Now, if you look all the way on the other side, you're going to actually establish district policies that support and respect family responsibilities, a variety of parenting traditions and practices with the community's cultural and religious diversity. Disability is seen as another form of diversity. So you can see there's quite a spectrum there and quite a great place to strive to be. But you have your required activities, which we're all probably doing, but now we have a little framework for, okay, what would we do as we progress along, and how can we connect that work with our issues around disproportionality. So it's a pretty awesome tool also. So now just a brief little discussion for those of us that are here, and you can just press *6 since we're a small group, and hopefully share how are some of the parents or community members in your districts giving input or supporting you with your family engagement efforts.
So, Cathie, we're going to unmute all phones and let people talk freely then. Susan, go ahead and do that.
All guests have been unmuted.
All right, so be careful what you're saying in your small group because you're talking to the whole group then. So, so go ahead, anybody who wants to chime in.
This is Mariam with Hayward Unified, and we do hold town hall meetings, and also our families, they come to, the site council meeting, and these are the way that they get involved. And we have a very active parent-teachers association. So those are the ways that family get really involved. And right now with LCFF, when we have the town hall meeting, a lot of parents participate.
Awesome. That's really a powerful, because when you have the town hall meeting, you're really involving the community. So that can be a very powerful tool. Anybody else want to share?
This is Mary from Paradise Unified School District. We have a variety of things that each of the sites do, but at the district level, we've got a senior citizens group, we have a parent group, we have a community group, and they all meet individually, usually with the superintendent, but have a well-defined diversity in that group, and so they're not only able to provide us information on how we spend our LCAP funds, but also on just some of the general things our district does. And that's
awesome.
consistent each year.
That's awesome. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else want to share before I move on? Because there's already so much good work going on out there. I think the powerful thing is to network with each other so that we can find out some great practices that we could implement in our own districts. Some of the keys to successful engagements that have been a recurring theme throughout the frameworks and throughout the research. Number one being relationship, communication. We absolutely have to foster that relationship piece with students as well as families. That is the most powerful thing we can do. And number two, the values, beliefs, and attitudes. We have to believe that our families can truly engage with us in a meaningful way. And the families have to be able to believe that they can engage with us. And connection to the curriculum. We can't just have fun things. We have to also make the parents feel part, and just any caregiver. I keep saying parents, but I'm trying to move the family. We really have to connect them to what we're doing and make it meaningful so they can feel a part of their child's life and a part of what their child's learning. And then community outreach, that I can't say enough about how powerful it is to be in the community, to know the community of your school, to know some of the partners in the community and form outreach groups. And it sounds like some of you have already done that and have ongoing things, and that's awesome. Very powerful. And just a little more about each one with the relationships, and this is just a little saying I found, that in organizations, real power and energy is generated through relationships, and it made my mind go to all the jokes about all the deals are made on the golf course. But, you know, that's really true, and again, that's that relationship piece. You're in a relaxed situation, you're feeling good about the people you're with, and that's when the most powerful things come about. So we have to try to create those kind of feelings with our families. Relationships are built on trust. That's the key, and that's what unfortunately has been broken for a lot of our families. Communication, working towards the same outcomes, appreciation and understanding of our differences and our assets. Family engagement requires schools to develop a relationship building process where the trusting relationships with parents are fostered. And again, I put this up because I think there are I think we all have that intent and we truly want to build those kind of relationships, but there are things getting in the way. Some of those things might be this perceived deficit model. And that's, are we planning based on a family's strengths and cultural assets, or are they planned around this deficit model that we're given, actually, in our mandates and the things we have to do? And you look at homelessness, foster youth, single-parent home, language, parent incarceration, poverty, special education, beliefs regarding cultural capital. All of these things are areas we work on and certainly need to support, need to have programs, but at times I think we fail to realize that each one of these also carries with it a lot of strengths, a lot of resilience, a lot of understanding that the families have gained in these situations that maybe we're not using in our planning, and that might be a key to opening some of those doors.
Cathie, hold on. We're going to just mute all the phones because we're getting a little bit of feedback.
Oh, okay.
All guests have been unmuted. All guests have been muted. You can unmute your line by pressing *6.
Okay, go ahead, Cathie.
Okay. You can hear me, though, right?
That's it. We hear you great.
Great. So now number 2, and that to me is the key, is this issue of values, beliefs, and attitudes. And I'm just really going to read this whole quote for you because I think it just really says a lot. It says, when families of color do not participate in school events, they can be perceived as disengaged, uninterested, uninvolved, uncaring, or angry. Examined differently, it could be understood that school districts are actually maintaining a stance of disengagement with families of color because deficit model thinking has led to assumptions that the parents are unable to make meaningful contributions to their children's education due to a lack of knowledge, social capital, or interest. And again, this can be a little tough for people to read and to hear, and of course, we're not doing that, and of course, we understand that, and we're trying to bridge that, and I truly believe we are. But I think we have to have these courageous conversations so that we can find out why many of our parents aren't engaging and what we can do to re-engage them. And I think this deficit model thinking has been around for so long, and parents have had the repercussions of that. I think that it's something we need to really look at and address with our staff, ourselves, and our families. And this concept of cultural capital, that while all parents bring different forms of cultural capital to different settings, not all forms of cultural capital are assigned the same value. And it's just a reality that most of the school norms are set on middle-class white America. It began that way with the European values and school systems, and I think that's kind of the norm. And when something goes outside of their norm is when we start to have kind of a rub and a mismatch and things don't go too well. And we might not understand that I carry baggage with me, and so does that parent, but do I understand the value that that parent also carries? And vice versa, does the parent understand what I bring to the table? So these are the kind of conversations we need to continue around this issue of cultural capital and our understanding and our values and our beliefs. And it's not to say that it's not great to have those, but we really have to embrace the conversation. Sometimes that right there is the bridge. And again, one size doesn't fit all. One type of parent engagement will not engage all your parents. We've seen that. And I know most of us, if we were truly honest, would realize there's one pocket of parents very active in our districts and schools. And those are the parents we continually see, but there's also a huge pocket that we don't see. So we have to ask that question, do we really believe our communities are rich reservoirs of talent and wisdom waiting to be accessed? And we need to ask that question of our staff. When we work and do PD, we need to bring this up constantly, this whole idea of what baggage do we have with us that might be getting in the way. And then what are some of the practices that challenge this belief that we all come with these great talents? And it's things like a school's lack of knowledge about the history of the school site community and the students they serve and the socio-cultural background of parents and their extended families. It's really critical. We talked about that a couple of slides ago, how important it is to know your community, and I'm thrilled that you guys are working on that. And I just worked recently with a school district who's actually looking into the history of the community, because it turns out a pocket of their African American parents many years ago were forced to live outside of the city. And this has created this ongoing disconnect with the school system and this lack of trust. But they're really trying to engage with families and to understand that history, and they're coming up with some pretty powerful things around that. Unfriendly staff in the main office that ignores families when they come in, ridicules parents for their lack of information, or don't provide families with the information requested. And I put this up because I've had this experience on so many occasions, and the staff in the front office are the first ones parents come into contact with. And they're the ones that we least train. So I'm not putting fingers at them. I think it's something we need to be cognizant of and to really involve them in some of this training around beliefs and attitudes. I'm going to share a little story with you that happened to me recently. I happened to be at a school site. I was filling out some paperwork, and I was in a little side room, and a parent came in, and I could hear her, and she was a little upset, and she was asking to speak to the principal because it was February. And she said she didn't understand why the whole office was full of pictures of Cinco de Mayo from a year ago, and there was no recognition of the fact that it was Black History Month. You know, nobody actually responded to her, and finally somebody did go in and get the principal, and the principal came out, and she was trying to explain, we have things going on, we just haven't put anything up yet, if you'll come back later. And the parent was pretty upset and just kind of huffed out and said she would come back later. You know, I'm kind of thinking, wow, that was kind of a missed opportunity. And when I walked out into the office staff was just, oh, can you believe that? Can you believe that parent? She has such an attitude. You can't work with those parents. I actually heard that. You know, and being in the job I did and having the beliefs I have, I had to kind of challenge that. And I said, well, what would have happened if you would have engaged in a conversation with this parent? Oh, well, she would have just gone off and had a big attitude, and it would have been awful. And I said, well, yeah, but how many children does she have at your school? So she had 3 kids at this elementary school. I said, well, that's pretty powerful. And I said, would you mind if I talked to her when she came back? I was talking to the principal. She goes, please. So the parent came back. She was upset, but we had about an hour-long conversation, and I simply said to her, I heard her out, and I said, what could you do to help this school and help us create a more inclusive environment? I totally agree with you. And it just changed the entire dynamic. She became this totally different person. She let her guard down. She has since planned all kinds of history lessons for the school. She's doing them. She was the brightest woman I've ever talked to. She's even gotten some stars to come in and talk to the kids at the assemblies. And now they form this great partnership, and the African American parents are getting involved. So I share that story because that was a missed opportunity, and the office staff was just rolling their eyes, and this horrible parent, and we can't talk to her, and what a missed opportunity. So I think we really need to make sure we're involving all staff, not just teachers, when we do training around our beliefs and our attitudes, and ways to engage, because it's not always easy. Parents do come in with attitudes. We don't know what their experience has been before, so it's something to work on. Having security guards escort parents. I was also at several schools where a parent is not allowed on campus without one of the security guards, which again doesn't make you feel like, yes, this is my school, I'm part of the school. It makes you feel like you're maybe an unwelcome visitor, so that's not a very good practice. I understand sometimes the parameters of that being in place, but we have to really be delicate about the way we do things. We really have to have our staff who are culturally competent and who have addressed some of the issues of just who we are and some of our hidden biases. We really need to have those conversations. Having no visible evidence that represents the family and child goes right back to that same parent. There was nothing there to indicate that there was any culturally relevant instruction going on. Now, in the classrooms there were, but I remember she made a comment like, I don't want to just see Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. They already know that. So, of course, when I did a walk of classrooms, every single classroom had Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. So that would be something to work on with staff. How can we extend that information? And now this parent's going to help the school. So that's a true partnership. And again, how do we move beyond this whole issue of disproportionality and building bridges between the home and school? Because I truly believe that's going to be the only way we really do that. When we look at all the issues around suspension, expulsion, all the behavioral issues, and usually it's a mismatch in cultural understanding in many cases. So how can we bridge that? And again, I just feel that none of us have the opportunity to develop the skills and knowledge we really need. Thanks to SPP-TAP, we're getting to have these conversations, but in most cases they kind of get put on the back burner because there's so much going on and so many initiatives and so much to do. And this little joke I found I really like, it's they only taught me how to think outside of the box, but I'm not trained for circles. And circles is where we really have to go. We really have to create those different ways of engaging that none of us are used to, a lot of us aren't comfortable with. So it's a new time, I think, for us to really embark on some of these relationships. And the question would be, how can we embed activities into our ongoing professional development efforts to build that capacity? And that's something I just want to share a few things with you today that I use, because I think one thing that's critical for us to really remember is this is a delicate topic. This is hard for a lot of people to talk about, this whole cultural mismatch and the deficit paradigm. All those things are really hard. So we have to do it in a way where we build a trusting and comfortable environment to have those conversations so that nobody feels like we're pointing the finger at them. And you think that, you think we certainly don't want to do that, because that'll just separate us even further. And I think one of the biggest issues is this whole, the way we communicate, the patterns and assumptions we have about each other. You know, I know we've all moved past that look at me that we used to all do as teachers, and I'm sure I did it one or two times to a child. Look at me. Because where I was coming from, that was respect. That's what you did. You looked at the teacher. But many of the kids, it's just the opposite. We've learned that. An example I can give is a few years ago when we moved into our house, our neighbors had just moved into, and my son and their daughters formed a really great friendship, and they were always playing together. And the mother would come to the door, and they were Korean, and she would come to the door and get her in the evening. And I said, oh, hi, how you doing? You know, how's everything? And she would just like kind of back away and bow her head. Never said much to me. And I thought, wow, she doesn't like me. And so I was thinking, what could it be? So I did a little self-reflection, and I thought, well, wait a minute now. I'm a loud person just by nature. That's who I am. My family's loud. We like to be fun and just, you know, we're kind of out there. So I thought, maybe that's a little too much. So the next time she came over, I opened the door, and I took a step back and just didn't say anything. And she perked right up and looked at me. It was really interesting. And the very next day brought me a big loaf of bread. She didn't have much language, English language, but I think that was her way of seeing that I finally understood, and our communication patterns were a little more matched than me staring her to death at the door. So it's just silly little things like that, but that really connects with me and makes me understand that sometimes our parents feel that way. You know, we have all this school lingo, we have all this stuff, but they're not quite communicating with us at that same place. So we need to really be aware of how that impacts everything. Again, culture is defined as the lens through which we look at the world, and we have to really remember that. We all come from a culture. Our families are, each school is a different culture. So we really have to remember that's how we're seeing things. And we see things not as they are, but as we are. I love this quote because it's really true. I want to share a little picture with you that I use a lot in professional development to kind of illustrate that. So if you look at this picture, just use your chat box to share your answer. What do you see if you just look at it real quickly? What do you see in this picture? Ah, Susan's a high achiever. She sees a musician. Oh, you guys are good. So the response you usually get is, oh, I see two old people. I said, that's true, but now if we look at that with a closer lens, what kind of things can we see? And again, someone saw the woman sneaking out of the doorway, which looks like the man's ear. The little bottle of tequila for the earring. This picture is actually called Forever Always, and it's an older couple remembering when they were young, and he serenaded her with the guitar. You can see those two pictures in the middle, and she would sneak out at night and drink tequila with him under the moonlight. So it's really kind of a neat picture, but I use it because it kind of shows if we make a judgment based on what we first see or recognize or identify with, look at all the richness we might miss. And I always share that with staff I work with because we want to make sure we're all doing that at all times. We're looking deeper, we're looking closer, we're really trying to see inside and what riches there are that we might have missed. So that's just a fun little thing. And this quote kind of goes with that. Many factors influence our thinking and behavior, but the way we perceive the world around us is the most fundamental basis for our behavior. It truly is. And I guess I'm using all these examples because I want us to all really start understanding the parents that I often hear referred to as those parents, or to have a chip on their shoulder, or this or that. It's because of these factors, because there's a different perception. We're coming at this from different places. So notice I'm a storyteller, if you can't tell. That's just what I like to do because it's how I make personal connections. That's part of who I am. And I find that stories kind of connect people together in a better way and in more of a non-threatening way. But this little picture of a coffee cup reminds me of a time when I found myself in a situation and I didn't have the cultural capital to navigate that situation. And I was in the mall with my mom one day, and it was such a rare thing for it to be just me and my mom and not all the kids and everything. And we were just having a great time, and we were sitting by the fountain. My mom said, I'd just love to have a cup of coffee. And I said, no problem. There's one of the Starbucks right over there. I'll go get you one. Now, mind you, I'm not a coffee drinker. Never had a cup of coffee. I don't like it. So I said, what kind of coffee do you want? She said, black coffee. Not a problem. So I walk over to Starbucks, and there's kind of a line, and it's going out into the mall, and I'm looking, and I'm feeling like, wow, I'm getting old. All these people are really young. That was my first thought. And then I'm hearing them shouting out things, and they're writing on cups, and I'm starting to feel a little weird, like, wow, I wonder how I'm going to order a cup of black coffee in here. I don't hear anybody talking about black coffee. So I thought, well, I'm an educated woman. Let me look up here at the menu. Do you think anybody had anything on there that I could decipher? Everything was 5 or 6 words long at least. I thought, wow, there's no black coffee. And the kids are yelling and shouting names, and all this stuff's going on, and I'm just feeling really uncomfortable, which is funny when I think about it now. I mean, how ridiculous. But I was really starting to feel like, wow, I don't get it. I'm going to be embarrassed. Do they have black coffee in this place? What am I supposed to order? And nobody's asking for small or large. They're shouting out all this other stuff. So I finally get up to the young man. He looks at me, shouts right at me, what do you have? And instead of looking at him like the educated, confident woman that I should be, I put my head down and just real softly said, do you have black coffee? And he started to laugh. And a couple of other people started to laugh. And I'm sure they were just laughing because of the whole thing of it being funny, black coffee at Starbucks. But that wasn't my perception. I thought, oh, they're all laughing at me. I'm old. I don't know what I'm talking about. So did I stay and wait for my black coffee? Nope. I just huffed right out of there, walked up to my mom, and she's sitting there. She says, well, where's my coffee? And I went on a tirade about Starbucks. I'm never going to Starbucks. I hate it, this and that. Everybody that met me for the next few months had to hear about how stupid Starbucks was. It's a silly little story, But I share it because when I sat back and thought, now I'm just being ridiculous about this Starbucks thing, I realized, wow, I became a behavior disordered adult in 5 minutes because I could not read the cues in my environment. I didn't understand what this coffee culture, and it is truly a culture, that whole Starbucks thing. People need to really get it. And I couldn't navigate that. I was just not feeling like I was in a place to do that. And I realized that when kids come to school and families come to school, same kind of thing. They don't get what's on the walls. They might not have the language to understand. They don't understand what we're trying to do. So it's a whole mismatch, and that's why a lot of times they huff out and they just get really angry. So it's something to think about, you know, and a story to help when you're doing PD, to help people really realize, you know, we all have been in that position where we don't get the cues and we're comfortable. And back to that whole relationship piece, just to end this story, was one day I'm doing special development, and this young assistant principal walked in that I just adored. I was his mentor for a few years, and he was just an awesome guy. And he comes walking in really early, and he's carrying, what, a big silver mug of Starbucks coffee for me. And I'm thinking, I'm not touching that. I hate Starbucks. I didn't say that, of course. And he comes walking up, smiling. He says, hey, I know you don't drink coffee, but I bought you, and I tell you to this day, I can't remember the name, Tai Chi something with 20 words with it. And I'm thinking, and I'm looking at him, and I thought, oh, my goodness, I'm going to have to drink this cup of Starbucks after I swore I would never go near one. And I did, and you know what? It was one of the best drinks I've ever had in my life. So it was funny, and it was kind of like the joke's on me. But it taught me that relationship is the bridge. If you have that positive relationship, you can get over any of your perceptions. So my perception of Starbucks changed drastically right then. Still can't order it. I have to have somebody write it down, but it was an interesting experience. And again, I bring that up because the role of culture and background is critical in the work we do. And how do we know our own backgrounds and beliefs and how they impact the students and the families that we're working with? And how does culture play a role in behavioral expectations and suspension rates? Again, I had a behavior issue in 5 minutes, and I'm an adult that should know better. So imagine if you really don't get any of the cues and you really don't feel part of the environment. What's going to happen? So we need to just bear all these things in mind when we're working with families and with our staff, because we're coming at it from the same place. Because schools and families, they come together as members of different cultures, as persons with language and thoughts about how the world is working, with ideas about how to behave, and with their own way of thinking and learning. And it's often very different than ours. There are patterns of cultural differences. We're different in the way we communicate, our attitude towards conflict, our approaches to completing tasks, our decision-making styles, our attitudes toward disclosure. There are some things, you know, like I said, my family's very loud, we talk, we share everything, but that's not okay with some people. That's not their style. And different approaches to knowing. There are definitely different ways to learn and to show that you know. Another little quote, culture is to humans as water is to fish. And in other words, you cannot survive without it. We can't expect people to change. We just can expect to understand and to appreciate one another, because difference is really awesome. And when we don't acknowledge that fact and embrace it, that's when we have all these mismatches and our parents are not engaged with us. And when culture is rejected and not recognized by schools, and I know we've all seen this, there's a lot of miscommunication. There's confrontations between the student, the teacher, the home and school, a lot of hostility, alienation, diminished self-esteem, school failure, and most importantly for us, the disproportionate representation. I think that's got a lot to do with it. We're not recognizing, again, back to that perceived deficit paradigm that we're in. Are we seeing the strength that many of our groups are bringing with them, or are we just seeing what's listed as something we need to support? So we really need to start looking at this issue of culture. And it's not the degree of difference between groups that causes harm, it's the lack of skill in restoring trust once it's broken. And I go back to that parent that came into the office. Her trust was broken, but look what a small little thing it took to restore that, and what an awesome resource she is now for the staff. And it's just we have to really work on how are we going to restore that trust. The last two keys to successful engagement are the connection to the curriculum piece and community outreach. And engagement with instruction has to be meaningful and relevant, and this isn't easy. I know a lot of people do home visits. Unfortunately, I've heard a lot of the home visits are just to talk about poor attendance or something like that. Hopefully, some districts are doing home visits where the teacher just goes out with a partner at the beginning of the year, just says, hey, I'm your child's teacher. This is what we're going to be learning this year. What do you think of that? What would you like to add? And they really they make that bond early on in the year, and I'm telling you, it makes 100% difference. My goddaughter works in a high school, and they do this every year. And she's in a neighborhood that's a little challenging, so they go as a team, but they have found nothing but wonderful experiences, and the parents are just thrilled and so inviting when they get there. Student-led conferences are another really powerful instructional strategy where the student actually leads the conference, has the parent, invites the parent, and the dialogue is mostly between the parent and the student, and it's pretty powerful, and the parent really engages in that, and they really understand what their child's doing. Community events, and I think it was Mary that mentioned they're doing a lot of the town hall meetings. That's awesome. Walks in the community. I actually got to go on a community walk with the school district, and it was absolutely mind-blowing and awesome. And this was a community with high poverty rates, a lot of issues. And I'm telling you, they just had decorated the entire community. We're so excited to have the teachers and the staff coming through their community talking, and it formed lasting partnerships. It was one of the most powerful things I've ever been part of. Culturally relevant Common Core strategies. I think Common Core has really opened the door for us to be able to engage students in culturally relevant instruction, which will also be a hook to the parents, because there's a lot of conversations involved, a lot of different ways of doing things, different ways of demonstrating our knowledge. I attached an article for you, Enabling Text, which is a high school strategy of using texts that are relevant for students that they're really engaged in and can engage their families in. Some work that's really powerful too is around some of the work with Fanny Cisneros. She does a poem, My Name, and you can engage staff in an activity around that and parents as an instructional tool, and they do a little thing about their name, they write poetry, and it's just awesome when you use strategies like that because it's engaging and it respects everyone and gives everyone access. Use topic of interest to students and families to teach content, relating poetry to rap music. I know a lot of schools are doing that. This is a key. We have to use text materials that are relevant to the current generation, because I know my son's way ahead of me, and he's still a teenager, and nothing I like to read is anything he likes to read, so we really have to make sure we're connecting with that generation. And using parents as in-house experts in areas where teachers might not have a full understanding of the culture. This particular parent, again, I was talking about, she's teaching the whole history of the African continent and going so in-depth. The kids are loving it. They're learning so much. And this was just something the teachers couldn't have done on their own without her support. So that's a true partnership. That's that dual capacity piece. You really are teaching and learning together. Allow students to explore concepts in their home language and teach them to switch to standard English in appropriate environments. Now this is kind of it's not a new thing, but it's something that I don't think a lot of districts are working on yet, and I think they will be with this whole concept of home language and how to teach students to switch that language into academic English so that they can navigate the whole school system. That's the way I look at it. I'm going to give you an example of a strategy I worked with in a standard English learner program. That strategy is called a personal thesaurus. And that simply is a child does a piece of writing, and I'll give you an example. He writes, I be hating the shoes. Well, of course, he gets that paper back, and there's red marks all over that paper. It's just not right. The kid doesn't know how to write. And he takes it home, and the parents, what's wrong with that? It looks good to me. But no, the teacher said it's all wrong. So not only does the student now have this negative perception of the way they speak and talk, because that's what they wrote down, but now the family feels that way about themselves. So it's one of those negative connections. Whereas if you take that word hating and you really examine it with the student in the home language, that just means jealous. I'm jealous of those shoes. So you take this thesaurus and under the word hating, you give them academic words to replace it in their writing. Jealous, envious, anything like that. So that student now has a tool. You say, hey, it's awesome. Your home language is awesome. But in this place called school, we have to use academic English. Let me show you how. So little strategies like that go a long way to bridge that cultural gap, because it is okay to have a home language and have nuances of your language. And we do need to honor that and respect it. Because when we tell the student it's not okay, we're saying your whole family, your whole community is not okay. So we really have to learn about some of these strategies and how we can teach families and students how to navigate the school system. We have to create those bridges between students' home and school life while still meeting the expectations. And I know that can be hard, but there are ways. And again, I think Common Core is going to be one of our ways to do that. We utilize the background knowledge, and we always say that. Are we using background knowledge? But are we truly understanding what the background knowledge of our students and families are and what their experiences are and how we can put them into instruction to make it more meaningful? And back to this word collaboration, I think that's the key to all of this work, because it's the most promising way for us to work together. But to be effective, we have to individualize some of our strategies, because one size does not fit all. We cannot do business as usual if we really, truly have the mission to engage all of our families. It's just not going to work. We have to step outside of that box and create that circle. Characteristics, if we really understand collaboration, the first one is parity. We have to be on an equal footing. And usually the school creates this whole atmosphere, and the parent has to just slide in there. We have to have the parent involved every step of the way in everything we plan and do. All parents, representatives from every group that's in our school. But to have mutual goals and respect, shared responsibility, not just, the parent has to, it's the parent's fault, if the parent did this. We have to really share that responsibility and have everyone participate in decision making. Another little quote I love, culture is a problem-solving resource we need to draw on, not a problem to be solved. And I think too often we are looking at this again in that deficit way. Wow, okay, so none of us understand culturally relevant instruction. So how are we going to solve that? And it's already solved for us. Culture is the enriching piece. We need to know how to use that effectively. And I think that's how we need to frame our professional development and our relationship building activities. That we already have this resource and it's rich and it's wonderful, and how can we embed that? So sharing best practices, I'm just going to keep going. If you have anything, please chime in and share with us. But I think a key, and I know a lot of districts have done this, I talked to some of the TA facilitators that have worked with districts to implement an equity policy, and that needs to really be part of the vision of that district, and the school board and everybody, every stakeholder needs to be involved in that. So, parent forums, a lot of times we feel like, oh, I can't have an African American Parent Summit, I'm leaving out this group of parents. But if you identify your African American parents as a group that's not engaging in the school, well, yes, indeed, that would be a great strategy. Not to say you aren't going to try to build those bridges and bring all your parents together, but how are you going to re-engage that group that doesn't feel it's about them? How are you now going to bring them back into the school system? So it is a pretty powerful thing. And provide professional development in teacher and administrator programs that deal with how we engage communities of color by including cultural, linguistic, and social justice parent engagement models, and the framework for some great tools to do that.
There's a question. Earlier you mentioned funds of knowledge. Can you talk more about what that is and how it can be used?
Yes, and I'll go back to that same parent. I'm just using her as an example today. But the funds of knowledge, we don't know what this parent is bringing with her if we don't ask, if we don't engage her in meaningful activities. We don't know, take the homeless parent. That homeless parent has learned a lot of critical survival skills, has a lot of resiliency, but we don't know that if we just see this as a homeless person. We've got to look at those funds. It's just like that. It's the same as the cultural capital. What are they bringing, and how can we engage that into our work and what we're doing? But we really have to change it to really seeing it as a fund, as an asset. And unfortunately, I think we tend to see the negative too much. So that would be There's a lot of work around funds of knowledge, and it goes along with the cultural capital piece, like what are they bringing, and unfortunately, why some of our parents disengage is what they're bringing is not recognized based on that norm of the white middle-class family. So if we're using that as our measure, and many times we are, and that's how our whole school system, as I said before, was built, that parent then is not going to be recognized for having a fund of knowledge that is going to benefit that school because it's measured differently. So it's really it's going back to that circle again, it's really looking at what that parent or that group of parents brings to us, because they all bring funds of knowledge and cultural capital. We just need to learn how to recognize it. And that goes both ways. That's why I think it's really important to engage in meaningful professional development with both groups present. Because parents need to also understand we also have these cultural assets that we would like to share with you and these funds of knowledge. How can we make those work together? Because again, gift is awesome.
All right, thanks.
Okay. And again, I wanted to share some promising practices with you. These are all little video clips you can log on and watch at any time. The first one, LA Unified is doing a new Family Matters broadcast every week, and this month they're dealing with civil rights and the impact on education. It's really a powerful roundtable conversation with school board members, community leaders, a couple of superintendents, and one of the members there is Dr. McKenna, who actually worked with Martin Luther King and was the principal. They did the movie, I believe, Stand and Deliver about or something. But it's very interesting to see this conversation and to see his perspective from many years ago, and then the very young community member and his perspective, and see how they're trying to navigate their conversation. It's really a great tool to use with your leadership group, because it just shows a whole broad range of where people are coming from and how they're bringing themselves together to have a conversation. So pretty powerful. There are some absolutely phenomenal video clips on a site of YouTube called Flamboyant, and there isn't a T. I thought there was a T, but it's not Flamboyant, it's Flamboyant. And they have samples of home visits and academic parent-teacher teams. They show all kinds of family engagement roundtables and conversations, and there's a lot of things about relationships between parents and teachers and how to build those. Very powerful. Some samples of the student-led conferences are on the next website, really terrific. And then there's a community partnership website, which is a group that's out of this first one with LA Unified, but they're not part of LA Unified. They run a whole community partnership here in Southern California and really dealing with some of the civil rights issues in the schools and some of the disconnect with the parents. Pretty powerful group and a really interesting video. Yeah, I always like to end with a quote. You probably figured that out about me already, but it's everything we need to make positive change is already here. And I love this little quote. It says, gather yourself, banish the word struggle from your vocabulary. All that we do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration. We are the ones we've been waiting for. And I end with that because I really believe we all have these resources and skills. We just need to kind of pull it together and get the time. I know that's always our biggest thing, but we do have this. We do have this capability, and I believe we truly all believe that this is important, or we wouldn't be on this phone call. So I hope that you can share some of these little quotes and things with your staff to kind of move the conversation forward. And just a personal reflection, and I'm not going to ask you to share anything. If you want to, that'd be great. But what further steps will I take to create and sustain a more culturally responsive plan for family engagement? And again, that goes back to we are the ones. And so what can you do when you go back to talk to your team the next time? What can you share with them? Maybe the frameworks, maybe one of the quotes. What can you do to kind of move that forward in a more culturally responsive way? So any comments, questions, complaints? I'll take those too.
Yeah, so give us a moment. We're going to take everybody off mute.
All guests have been unmuted.
All right, so any insights, comments, or questions? Everybody's off mute, so be careful any jokes that you make.
See, these lunchtime meetings, George, they're hungry.
Okay, well, Or you can, if you feel immodest, write it in chat.
Or if you have any great strategy you're using, please share that with others. We have a quiet group.
Well, okay. So, Cathie, here's Cathie's contact information. If you have any questions, if you want to know more about her wonderful, wonderful stories, or want to talk about any issues that your district might be having around this topic, there is her contact information. Cathie is very, very responsive. And Cathie, thank you so much for your wonderful, wonderful stories and your slides. People who are on this call can utilize the information on the slides for your own family engagement activities. There's a lot of good stuff there for your stakeholder teams, and so please go ahead and utilize this great information. I also look at your computer right now, and there's a very quick evaluation form on this. This will help us tailor the next webinar towards your needs. So please take a little bit of time and fill it out. Thank you very much for participating in your webinar. Again, it will be archived shortly and on our SPPTAP.org website, so that if any of your team wants to view it and they were not able to, you can go on and look at it. So with that, take a couple minutes and fill out this form, and we look forward to our next webinar with you. You will, since you're on this, you will be on our mailing list for the next 2 webinars, and we look forward to having you on and seeing you then. Cathie, excellent job. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank all of you.
Thank you.